Oh, boy. Would not want to be Hunter Biden, heck, even potentially Joe Biden right now, as it's been obviously a tumultuous last several days on that front. And today, Hunter Biden's former business partner is going to be testifying behind closed doors. His name is Devin Archer, for a GOP-led committee as they continue the investigation into Hunter. And ultimately, it's really about Joe. What did Joe know, and how involved was he potentially in these business dealings? We now welcome on and say hello to our friend Bill Jacobsen, Cornell law professor. Legal Insurrection is where you can find him, doing great work there, joining us on KCMO in Kansas City. Bill, good morning. Thanks for being here. For those who maybe have just been a little out of the loop on the news front, the Hunter Biden story right now, where are we on this story, and what are you watching to start the week moving forward?
Hi, thanks for having me on. So last week, the plea deal that Hunter Biden had fell apart. Doesn't mean it won't be put back together, but the judge was not ready to accept what appeared to be a deceptive deal where Hunter Biden would receive essentially universal immunity for everything else he's done in his life if he pleaded guilty to 2 minor tax charges and went into a diversion program for lying on his background check form for his handgun. So he would essentially get no time in jail, no real punishment, and would be absolved in a very deceptive way of potential failure to register as a foreign agent, other things he may have done. So it was not just a sweetheart deal. It was a very tricky sweetheart deal, and not the sort of thing that this judge was used to seeing, and she asked a lot of questions. So at the end of the day, it was not accepted. It wasn't rejected, but she wants to know more about how it's structured and why it's structured that way. Then that's the legal front. So the legal front is the prosecution, which seems very interested in giving him the deal of the century, the president's son, and the defense could come back with something new or the same thing or a better explanation. So it may still happen. Separately, on the political front, as you mentioned, Devin Archer, Hunter's business partner, is supposed to testify in a closed hearing today on Capitol Hill. I believe it's a deposition. It's not necessarily testimony before a lot of members of Congress, but it will be under oath and transcribed. And the transcript apparently is going to be released some point later this week about Hunter Biden's dealings. And particularly what everybody's interested in is Joe's involvement. Mm-hmm. But Joe Biden, when running for president, and since then has consistently said he had no knowledge, no conversations, no involvement in Hunter Biden's dealings with Chinese and Ukrainian business entities in what appears to be a payoff to the then Vice President of the U.S. and presidential candidate. So that's where we are. It's all about not really Hunter Biden. It's all about Joe Biden and what Joe Biden knew and when he knew it.
Yeah, and Bill, at this point, Hunter's, a grade A sleazeball. Everybody knows it, but it really isn't relevant, as you note, to the broader picture here. How difficult, there's a legal angle and there's a political angle. I got to imagine the political angle is easier to achieve than the legal angle. Is the Joe Biden stuff more about politics, or is there also a legal element here that you think is worth watching?
Well, I think it will depend on what we find out from Devin Archer, and there's obviously a huge political angle here, because if Joe Biden was effectively selling influence, particularly while he was vice president, not just when he was post-vice president, if he was selling his influence, if he was involved in helping his son cut deals with foreign entities, that could push towards an impeachment, or more likely, it would push the Democrats to get rid of him, figuring he won't survive till the 2024 election politically. Legally, I don't know that I think it would depend what they disclose, whether it provides any legal risk to Joe Biden. That's a little bit premature to say, because unfortunately, depending how it's structured and how it happens, selling influence is what politicians do all the time. But when they lie about it, that takes it to a different level.
Mm-hmm. Bill Jacobsen is joining us here on KCMO. Cornell Law Professor. Legal Insurrection is where you find him. So is this something, Bill, the timeline on all this with Hunter and tying it into Joe? I mean, is this something that is a weeks-long process? Is it months in the making? I mean, you mentioned the judge and the plea deal from last week not getting rejected but not being accepted. Like, how do we look at this from the standpoint of what our timeline is on any of this and how that plays out with an election, 15 months away?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big question. Is Joe Biden going to be the nominee for the Democrats, and how is this going to play out? I think that we will have a sign as to how it plays out if you watch the coverage from the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the mainstream news channels. When they turn on Joe Biden, when they say he cannot be allowed to be the nominee again, and they're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart, they're doing it out of fear that Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis will win, whoever the nominee is. So when they turn on Joe Biden, that's when you'll know. When there start to be leaks to the New York Times and the Washington Post from within the White House, from the Biden bureaucracy, from the FBI, when you see those leaks and the mainstream media has turned, that's when you'll see the real political pressure on Joe Biden.
Yeah, that's a very good point. You're seeing a little bit of it. I saw yesterday Jim Himes, Democrat from Connecticut, told MSNBC that Hunter Biden absolutely broke the law, and if he did, he should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I know that's not about the old man, but you're starting to feel like that's happening in the circle, Bill, here. And is that just being unable to deny the truth, or is that finally people coming to the realization of, when it comes to politics, Joe's certainly not the guy that we want leading the party going into this crucial election year, or a combination of both?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the question. Who is going to run against him? Who is going to challenge that? That's really the question. Who are they going to anoint as the successor? You would think that Kamala Harris would not naturally be the one. She's the VP, but she's got her own problems, which is that, she's widely disliked. Every time she opens her mouth, she says something foolish or mockable. So, who are they going to do? Don't lose track of the governor of California, as horrible as it is to think that he might be their nominee and might win. I think he's probably the most likely successor to Joe Biden. He's very slick, he's very smooth, and he's got a lot of money.
So true. And comparing this, Bill, in the last minute to what we dealt with Russiagate and how much more smoke there is here than there ever was with Russiagate, and how the media's covered these two things. I mean, how surprised or maybe not surprised are you when you compare Russiagate to this thing right now with Hunter and its potential connection to Joe?
Well, we may find out today whether there's actually a fire there, not just smoke. With Trump, it was just smoke. If Devin Archer testifies the way many people expect him to testify, then there's a fire there. Then, there was never anyone who came forward who said Donald Trump was on the phone with the Russians, okay? You may have somebody who comes in and says Joe Biden was on the phone with the Chinese and the Ukrainians. So that would make it very different. Is here you will have an eyewitness to Joe Biden's involvement, whereas in Trump it was all speculation. There's a secret server someplace, and there's this and there's that, and he was at an event and blah blah blah. There was never any hard proof of anything. That's why it fell apart. But if Devin Archer testifies the way people think he's going to testify about Joe Biden's involvement in his son's business dealings, now you've got a fire, and the Democrats are going to have to figure out how they put out that fire.
Bill Jacobsen, Legal Insurrection, doing great work. Bill, always good to have you on in Kansas City. Thanks for the preview. Thanks for the time. We'll be following this week and talking to you soon. Appreciate it.
Great. Take care.
Absolutely. Good stuff.